So, hi everyone. My name is Desa Cree-Daniel, and I am the chair of the Professional Development Committee for AMCD. And so today we are bringing Dr. Kristy Christopher-Holloway, who's going to talk about strong Black woman syndrome and generalizational trauma, what counselors need to know. And I'm very grateful to have her here. She's talking about African American women experiences, similar rates of mental illness compared to their counterparts to other ethnicities, yet seek treatment at lower rates. So we're going to talk about some cultural factors as well, along with understanding how the strong Black woman syndrome may impact Black women's mental health overall. So Dr. Christopher-Holloway, thank you for being here today, and I will give it back to you.
All right, thank you for having me. So, can y'all hear me? I'm gonna assume that you can. So we will go ahead and get started. What I will probably do is just check in throughout to see if anyone has any questions, but I kind of want to make sure that I do get through to the content, and then we can kind of go from there. So of course we will be talking about the strong Black woman syndrome and generational trauma and what counselors need to know. So I know that everyone on here may not be a clinician or may not be in the helping profession. So I'm gonna talk in a way that everyone can understand the content for today's webinar. So please just know that if you have any questions or if you would like to share any of this information or use any of this information, just please contact me prior to doing so. And I will also make sure that I share my slides too at the end so that y'all can have them. So just a little about me. I am kind of doing a lot, but I am a counselor educator, as well as a speaker, supervisor, and consultant. So in a world of fact checking and receipts, I'm going to give you mine. LPC here in Georgia, a national certified counselor, distance credentialed counselor, as well as a clinical supervisor. I am an assistant professor at Lindsey Wilson College in the School of Professional Counseling. And then I own and operate New Vision Consulting and Training, as well as New Vision Counseling Center, which is a group private practice. I primarily, though, work with minority women experiencing infertility trauma, birth trauma, reproductive loss, and then issues related to maternal mental health. So I am certified in perinatal mental health. If you've been a part of any of my trainings or webinars, you will see that I am down to earth. I like to keep it real. I'm very entertaining. So we can get it. If you have not been a part, you are in for whatever may pop off today. So what are we going to do? Our objectives, we're going to define what does it even mean to be the strong Black woman. What is the strong Black woman syndrome? We're going to develop an understanding of generational trauma. Some people may not have heard of that. Okay. Also identify how the strong Black woman syndrome may impact Black women's mental health. And then if they make it to our offices for counseling, we're wanting to recognize how the strong Black woman may present to counseling and some of the treatment issues that may present as well. And then at the end, we will develop effective clinical strategies when working with the strong Black woman syndrome. So that's what we're going to do today. I'm going to start out very broad and then just kind of really funnel it down. But also knowing that as clinicians and as helping professionals, when we are working with African American women or Black women, I will use the terms interchangeably, but it's important for us as mental health practitioners to recognize the implications of this narrative of the strong Black woman and generational trauma, to understand the stigmatization that comes with this as far as it relates to mental health treatment, and then the trauma impact. Okay. So what is trauma? We know through the DSM that it is an exposure to this actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violence in a couple of ways. Directly experiencing the trauma, witnessing it in person as it occurred to maybe others, learning maybe about traumatic events from a close family member or maybe a close friend may have experienced some type of traumatic event. or some type of accident or some type of act of violence. So we're kind of getting that trauma vicariously maybe, right, or secondary. And then also experiencing repeated or extreme exposure to aversive details of the traumatic event. So when we talk about what it means to be a Black woman in America, and a strong Black woman, you may say, well, what does this have to do with trauma, right? What is the point? So we also know that trauma, their symptoms are, flashbacks, trouble concentrating, maybe there's trouble sleeping, feeling alone, angry outbursts. We're going to talk about the angry Black woman in a moment, feeling worried or feeling sad. But when we look at this and we look at this definition, I want you to just kind of think about this as we go through this webinar. Does the DSM fully encompass the experiences of people of color and Indigenous people when we are looking at this definition of trauma and looking at the criteria of trauma? So what is historical trauma or generational trauma? You will see historical grief, historical unresolved trauma, transgenerational trauma, intergenerational, multi-generational trauma, secondary traumatization, psychological wounding, collective trauma, historical loss, sociocultural stress, and then community trauma. So, if you hear any of these terms as you are working with African American or Black women, knowing that this is what this is talking about. So let's look at and let's define this. So we know that we have almost like this communal perspective of trauma. When we look at it, we know that trauma affects communities. So SAMHSA says that it is the cumulative emotional and psychological wounding as a result of group traumatic experiences, which is transmitted across generations within a community. And trauma or historical trauma, generational trauma, whichever term you're going to use, can be experienced by anyone living in families at one time marked by severe levels of trauma, poverty, dislocation, war, all of this. But these people are still suffering as a result. So I was reading an article not too long ago, and the lady talked about, we hear post-traumatic stress disorder. And she said, if people are constantly in a traumatic experience, where is the post? There is no post. It's still happening. So again, this is continuously happening. Continuously, they're still suffering as a result of this. So when we look at generational trauma or transgenerational, you'll see intergenerational, you'll see multi-generational, okay? So each generation, though, of a family may experience its own forms of trauma, its own forms of experiences or events that can be traced back to decades. So multiple generations of a family can transmit the damage of the trauma throughout years. So transgenerational trauma, again, we're looking at the consequence of trauma that's experienced or transmitted through subsequent generations. So it can be physiological, environmental, social, and all of this is going to result in this trauma or this cycle of trauma. And then when we look at intergenerational, we're knowing that this is being passed down through generations and it's going to affect a family. So we have to stop and ask, well, what does this look like in Black women? And especially as Black women who really do hold on to the narrative of, I have to be this strong Black woman. Okay, so again, like I said, it can be traced back to decades. I was in a NBCC training last year, and one of the ladies who was presenting or speaking, and I value her a lot, but she said she was doing this presentation and one of the attendees started crying. She said, I don't even know why I'm crying. And she told her, she said, it's okay, you don't have to know because these may not even be your tears. Okay, so that's what this is looking like. These may be your grandmother's, your great-grandmother's tears, because as we're looking at trauma, we're looking at the effect that it has on the body, the effects that it has on the brain, how this is transmitted through families. And so I may still be healing through or experiencing traumas that were related to my grandmother or maybe related to my great-grandmother. So again, African Americans or Black Americans, there's a historical exposure to generations of discrimination, racism, race-based segregation, and the resulting poverty that happens. There's also a lot of exposure to microaggressions. And if we know that microaggressions, these are going to be those events involving discrimination, racism, daily hassles. They're going to be targeted to individuals from diverse and racial and ethnic groups. So it may come out as, I don't see color. Well, that technically means then perhaps you don't see me because I am a person of color. Or you're not like the rest of them. Or, oh, let me touch your hair. These are those things that can be micro and sometimes macroaggressions. I was telling someone not too long ago some of the speaking engagements that I do, and the first thing she said is, how impressive. I'm impressed. And so that is a microaggression. I'm sitting here, well, what's impressive? Is it impressive because I speak, because of the topic I speak, that I'm a Black woman that speaks, that I have this, behind my name and in front of my name? So these are the things that come out that sometimes people are not recognizing, but these are some of the events or some of the experiences that Black women are kind of dealing with on a daily basis. So then we stop and we go back and we say, well, how does this trauma uniquely impact Black women? Okay. And so now we can take a look at it, because we also know, as I already said, the basic family structure is impacted. Okay. There's this trickle down effect of this trauma that has been inherited genetically. Okay, so if you're stopping and looking at it, we're looking at the trickle down effect of slavery, discrimination and oppression, traumas that we experience in our neighborhoods, police brutality, different types of violences that become this compound effect. And so when a person doesn't have that outlet or doesn't have that means to heal through it, and it's constant trauma, constant trauma, constant trauma, this is what we begin to start seeing. So Dr. Joy DeGruy, if you've heard of her or not, but I love her, and I'm actually in the process of taking a 10-week course that she is doing right now on African Americans and trauma as well. But Dr. DeGruy said there is what's considered the post-traumatic slave syndrome, and this is her theory, okay? She said that this theory explains a lot of the adaptive, or what may have become maladaptive survival behaviors for African American communities throughout the United States and throughout the diaspora. And that's basically descendants resulting from slavery and the chattel, centuries of the chattel slavery. And so the diaspora are the misplaced Africans that have been dispersed throughout the United States. But Dr. DeGruy said that PTSS exists as a consequence of the multi-generational oppression of Africans and their descendants, okay? So she said there's this map. That's what she identifies it. The M is for multi-generational trauma, together with the continued oppression. Then we get to the absence of the opportunity to heal. So like I said, you have this compounded trauma, these compounded situations that there's not really an opportunity to heal. Or the access to even the benefits available to many people in society. So we're going to talk about even access to care, and access to care looking like insurance, looking like clinicians, looking like culturally competent or culturally or clinicians that who may look like me, minority or ethnic minority clinicians. And then so she says, then we get to the post-traumatic slave syndrome. So we have all of these experiences that put Black people or Black women in this this space, so to speak, where it's this constant trauma, and a lot of the actions or a lot of behaviors have become a means of survival. They've become a way to adapt. So I think one of the examples that she gives is maybe someone may come or maybe I have my son, I have twin boys and they're 4, so they're kind of all over the place sometimes. And they may be running around and doing this and doing that, but I may say, no, get over here, get here, stay here. Well, one of those reasons is because I want to keep an eye on you and be safe, but she may postulate that a lot of that is also because I can't have you run off because many, many years ago, you may have gotten taken and been sold and the family is continuously being broken apart. Okay, so sometimes these kids can't be kids because of the fear or this inherited genetic piece of us that we have where it becomes this post-traumatic slave syndrome. So we have to say, what does this look like in Black women that are being oppressed and maybe being marginalized as well? So here are some symptoms of historical trauma: depression, anxiety, isolation. So think about this when you may have some of these people coming, these clients coming to your office, or maybe not even coming to your office. Again, you may not be a mental health clinician, you may be in some other type of field, but the anger, the shame, discomfort around white people, fear and distrust, loss of concentration, substance abuse, violence, and suicide. So the Black woman, what is this? Okay, so I found these pictures the other day and I really did like them. So this first one says, while struggling with the reality of being a human instead of a myth, the strong Black woman passed away. Medical sources say she died of natural causes, but those who know her know she died from being silent when she should have been screaming, smiling when she should have been raging, from being sick and not wanting anyone to know because her pain might inconvenience them. She died from an overdose of other people clinging to her when she didn't have even have energy for herself. So as you're listening to this, as I'm going through this, think about, does any of this apply to you? Does any of this apply to anyone that you may know? Does any of this apply to any of the clients who may present into your office? She died from asphyxiation, from secrets she kept trying to burn away instead of allowing herself the kind of nervous breakdown she was entitled to have, but only white girls could afford. She died from being responsible because she was the last rung on the ladder and there was no one under her she could dump on. The strong Black woman is dead. Sometimes she stumped to death by racism. Sometimes she was stumped to death by racism and sexism, executed by high-tech ignorance while she carried the family in her belly, the community on her head, the race on her back. Think about this, okay? So let's go back to this middle picture here. I have a friend who experienced a couple years ago some really traumatic and just extreme things to happen in her family, and it really ripped her family apart. And everyone kept telling her, you're strong, you're gonna make it through this. Come on, you got to be a strong woman, pull it together. No one allowed her to grieve the breakdown of her family. No one allowed her to grieve everything that was going on. And she told me, she was like, I don't want to be strong. I want to be weak today. Can I get the benefits of maybe a white woman today? Can I not worry about having to be strong today? But I can't, because everyone in society is telling me this is the way or everyone that's important, at least that matters to me, is saying this is the way that I'm supposed to respond. So I can't even have a moment knowing and watching my family fall apart. So sometimes she was stumped to death by racism, sexism, executed. So, but how many times your clients may say, or you may say, I got to do it all. You know, I'm carrying the family in my belly. I'm the one that holds the family together, the community on her head, okay, the race on her back. These are the things that I have to do, perhaps as a Black woman or a strong Black woman, in order to keep things going. So we know that the Black family, even the breakdown, the generational or even the historical breakdown of the Black family, all the way from slavery up into today, where perhaps the men aren't there. And so what are all these responsibilities that the Black woman may be holding on to or having to do? Okay, I heard someone. Somebody have a question? Okay. So let's look at these labels and these cultural stigmas that come. So you may hear the strong Black woman. Okay. I was raised that you had to be strong, independent, and self-sufficient. And I was a little girl, honey, and I did not know what self-sufficient meant, but I knew I was supposed to do it. So, but you may hear Superwoman, you may hear the independent Black woman, and unfortunately, when a Black woman is speaking her mind or having her voice, you may even hear the angry Black woman. You may have been called the angry Black woman. I have to find the link, and I meant to pull it up, but again, another video I was watching, and the lady was saying, you know, I'm sorry. I'm not angry, or that you perceive that I'm angry. And she said, I'm pissed off because these are the things that I'm having to experience every single day. These are the things that a society has put out here for me. So I'll find that and make sure when I share the slides that I hyperlink it in here. But we also hear Black girl magic, and we're going to talk about that too. But what are some of the other labels or some of the other descriptors that you can think of as you look at this, or maybe you think about your own experiences or experiences of others that you know? So a lot of times we may even, it goes with the angry Black woman, but the resting bee face, right? I mean, you know what the bee is for. But I always think about, is it Maxine Waters, right? She'll give that look. But what if people said, is she angry? She's the bee, she's this. All because I'm standing up for myself or I'm speaking my mind, but it comes off maybe a little too aggressive for some or too much for some people. So, but when we look at these may create resiliency, but how can they affect, how can they affect this woman? Can I be a strong Black woman? Am I a superwoman? Can I just be normal? Can you just let me live? So what is the strong Black woman? This is probably why most of you that are here came anyway. So they're like, why don't she go ahead and get to the point? So what is the strong Black woman? And what does it mean, right? So I'm glad that you asked. This is it's a cultural stereotype. And so let me just preface this by saying, you may identify, or someone you may know may identify as a strong Black woman. And it's nothing wrong with that. The issue becomes when that narrative becomes all that you know, and so it's beginning to become maladaptive for you, or is beginning to become problematic. So you can be a strong woman, a strong Black woman, a strong whatever you can be, but it's when we start internalizing this to the point to where we are neglecting ourselves. Your client may be having other experiences. Okay, so it can be a positive stereotype as well, but you have to kind of look at it from the context of what that person may be experiencing. But anywho, it was coined in the 19th century to counteract all of these negative images and these social depictions, these sexualized perceptions of Black womanhood. So if you look at it, even, you don't even have to go too far back. If you look at some of the things on TV now and how it depicts Black women, but we'll just go back for the sake of that. But you may have had the manipulative Jezebel. You may have had the mammy, right? That's the one taking care of all the kids, doing everything, wet nursing, all of those things. Or you may have had Sapphire. Sapphire would have been your angry Black woman. She would have been the one that's the Spitfire. So the strong Black woman is going to theorize that African-American women have to be strong, right? We can handle problems without needing help or support from others. Black women have to consistently maintain this superwoman strength, this fortitude, this control, this balance. You got to be resilient. You got to be independent. You got to persevere because, hey, our people made it through. But you got to persevere through all of this gender bias, all of this race bias, all of these things that are inflicted by society. So it becomes or became a necessity for survival. And if I'm going to be compared to the Jezebel, the Mammy, the Sapphire, well, yep, I'm gonna want to be the strong Black woman. If these are my options, that's what I'm going to do. Or that's how I'm going to want to be perceived, so to speak. The strong Black woman syndrome, though, is also a label that was within the African American community. It's almost a compliment, okay? It's a compliment without even seeing the impact of, you know, that it has. So it becomes a badge of glory. You're termed a strong Black woman. It's almost like a look, Ma, I made it type thing. I was working with, she may have been 19 or 20, and she said, well, I just have to be strong. I have to be a strong woman. I have to be a strong Black woman. And in my best King Jaffa voice from Coming to America, I said, who told you that? Right? Who told you that? And she stopped and she said, I don't know. I don't think anyone did. I just know that I'm supposed to be. So again, if you go back and you think about some of the information that I've already shared, you'll see this trickle down piece. If her mom did not directly say this, or grandma or aunts or anything, where did this come from for her? Okay, why did she get this? So we'll talk about that a little more. But anyway, if African American women are not strong, there's a connotation that perhaps she's weak and fragile, and that's just not acceptable. It's not acceptable maybe for her. It may not be acceptable in the Black community. You cannot be seen perhaps as weak. So remember when I talked about stigmas that are there, you can't be seen as fragile. You have to be strong. Everybody's relying on you. You can't break down. And if you break down, you sure enough better not do it in front of people, because then, hey, they see that weakness. And so a lot of the women that I work with, I will hear, they will tell me, I can't be vulnerable. Vulnerable is weak. And so we shift that sometimes and talk about that. Or, hey, the only time that I'm vulnerable, because sometimes it's still that very early, the only time I am vulnerable is when I'm in here with you. So 50 minutes, maybe 60 minutes, if the session goes a little longer, you're telling me for 60 minutes out of an entire week, that's the only time you're able to be vulnerable, to allow that guard down. And they'll tell me as soon as I walk out of this office, I may say, well, hey, how was, your week since our last session, or how have you been taking care of yourself since our last session? And they'll say, as soon as I walked out your door, my guard went back up, that mask went back on, because I had to go back out here and tackle society. I had to go back out and maybe be mom, be wife, be cousin, be sister, be an employee, an employer. I had to go do all of these things. Okay. So what is the toll of this? We got to ask ourselves that. So let's look at Black Girl Magic. Hashtag Black Girl Magic. That became like super popular some years ago, and it's still really popular. But is this the new age concept of the strong Black woman? So, Kashawn Thompson developed this in 2013. Her idea was to celebrate the perseverance of Black women. But then let's talk about this. Let's look at it. When we even go back to the Superwoman, or when we're looking at magic. So, hey, depending on your cultural belief, magic may be very real, and I accept that and acknowledge that. But for others, sometimes it's really not. So am I trying to live up to an illusion? So when you think about perhaps magic that we've seen on TV, David Blaine, who is it, Penn and Teller, whoever all the magicians are, right? There is this illusion. It's not about what you're watching. You're looking for something, but you're missing all of the other pieces, right? So I'm looking for maybe this hocus pocus, this magic wand, all of this, right? But is this identity based on an illusion, right? Am I developing this through an illusion? I can't wave a magic wand and all my problems be gone. Like, I am human. Okay, so having to stop and say, is this almost being taken too literal? And is it further perpetuating perhaps a narrative of a strong Black woman when it is maladaptive to that person? So let's look at all of these roles, okay? Maybe write down, count how many you identify with on here. If it's not one on here, when we get ready for comments or somebody chime in and let me know if there's some other ones on here, but spiritual leader, disciplinarian, the grandmother, the housekeeper, the party planner, wife, daughter, caretaker, the mother, chef, homeowner, employee, volunteer. You got a lot going on, right? So what are some of these other roles? So I already talked about African-American women having these roles as the mother, as the nurturer, as the financial supporter, because this was due to the compromised position of the African-American family. So the African-American men were taken away. And it was just a further breakdown of the family. And so again, whether we're looking at the past or whether we're looking at current day, we know that there is a breakdown a lot of the African-American family. So these women had to take on all of these roles by default. And it just became, I'm gonna just keep doing all of this. Again, remember I said sometimes it's even seen as a badge of honor, okay? So here comes my transparency moment. So let's look at this. It's a bird, it's a plane. Nope, it's the Black Superwoman. So what does she do? She can balance housekeeping, motherhood, a busy career. She's not messing up her makeup, her eyelashes, her nails, nothing. She is juggling so many tasks in the air. So all the people on the outside looking in, they're shaking their head like, oh my goodness, when is this going to come crashing down? So like I said, my own moment, at the time, was a doc student in private practice, owning my practice, had 2 locations. It was a group practice, a mom to newborn twins, a wife, speaking, doing all of these things. But people would say, oh, you're a super mom, you're a superwoman. And I'd be like, look, I'm just trying to be a woman doing some super things. Don't put that label on me, because indirectly and internalized, I feel like I have to live up to this. And so sometimes that's what these clients are doing, because, hey, I've been doing it, or if I don't do it, who else is going to do it? So it's a matter of this juggling act. It may also be their norm. Okay, so when you're working with clients who are experiencing this, understand that it may be their cultural upbringing. So as clinicians, we got to understand, the DSM, we got to understand impairment, but helping the client to see how their normal may be impacting or impairing their lives. Like I said, it could still be a positive frame of reference, but is it impacting other things, right? So are you the selfless saint? Are you the one saying, I won't complain? I was raised in the Baptist church, and if you were too, you know the song, I Won't Complain. I will not sing that one right now. But she has given up her life in service of another, perhaps to an ailing parent, a disabled child. She's taking care of the husband. She's dealing with this old crazy boss. All of this stuff. She doesn't have a life of her own, no time to take care of her own needs, no hobbies, no interest of her own. When you ask her how she's doing, she'll smile and say, oh, I won't complain, blessed and highly favored, all of those, right? And so you stop and you're assessing this. You're looking at this. So I'll ask clients, well, what do you do? What do you do outside of X, Y, and Z? Oh, nothing. I just go to work and go home because I'm worn out at the end of the day. Or, well, I used to like, playing tennis, or I used to like journaling, or I used to like gardening, whatever it may be. And so I'm looking like, well, what happened? Where's the used to do? And so it's like, oh, I have to do this. I work and I get off work and I got to get the kids and I get the kids and I got to get the house and I got to do this and I'm taking care of my mom and then I got to go here and I can't, my emails from work pop up on my phone. Somebody was just telling me like they just had a baby a few weeks ago. It was like, I'm going to be checking my email. And I'm like, what? You're like in labor. You were literally in the hospital ready to deliver. They had to induce your labor. So you were there and you're telling me you're checking work emails. What is this about? Okay. If I don't do it, then no one else will. So this is the busybody. She's pouring hours into and all her energy, and maybe into the church, it may be running the food bank, it may be leading a social organization, she's helping the less fortunate. She's a little bossy and domineering at times, but no one's going to tell her that, because she knows, and they know as well, that everybody relies on what it is that she's doing. She's going to be the one who gets it done. And so she may have that mindset, well, I just got to do it. If I don't do it, it's not going to get done, or it's not going to get done right. So that's whole saying of, you can have one person doing 100 jobs, or 100 people doing one job each. She's going to be that one person doing 100 different jobs. So I like to talk about what this even looks like in our music, okay? So we got Superwoman by Alicia Keys. Alicia Keys wrote this song. She wanted everybody to know about the unstoppable spirit of Black women. This was my anthem. So my first real vehicle, I had a Chevy Silverado, a 99 Chevy Silverado pickup truck that was charcoal gray. And I promise you, I would bump Superwoman, okay? So let's look at the words. So she says, everywhere I'm turning, nothing seems complete. I stand up and I'm searching for the better part of me. I hang my head from sorrow, state of humanity. I wear it on my shoulders, gotta find my strength, because I am a superwoman. Yes, I am. And then she got the amen choir back there saying, yes, she is. Then she says, even when I'm a mess, I still put on a vest with the S on my chest. Oh yes, I'm a superwoman. So let's go down to this last bullet point here. And she says, when I'm breaking down and I can't be found, and I start to get weak because no one knows me beneath these clothes, but I can fly, we can fly. I'm a superwoman, okay? Then, and it never fails, every time I get ready to do this, I say Beyonce. And that's Destiny's Child written here right in front of me, right? But I always say Independent Women by Beyonce. We know Beyonce was running Destiny's Child, but okay, Destiny's Child wrote the song Independent Women. Sing along with me. Somebody turn on your mics. Who's gonna sing with me? I'm waiting. Somebody, who's coming?
All the women who independent.
Throw your hands up at me. Come on, all the honeys who making money. Throw your hands up at me. So, but she says, girl, I didn't know you could get down like that. But at the end of it, after all the harmonizing and everything, which I am not going to do, she said, because I depend on me, they say, I depend on me. Ladies, it ain't easy being independent. All right, so my former intern and now my supervisee told me about this song the last time we presented on this, and it's Nobody by Janae Aku. So look at this, because this is going to talk about that intergenerational trauma. Let's look. And I never needed nobody, never needed no one. No, I don't need nobody. I picture her rolling her head, right? Rolling her neck. I don't need no one. Shit, I don't need no one. So please don't tell me to chill, because I don't need nobody. Then go down to the next one. She says, I don't need no one. I don't need no one. Why we never see my mother cry? She's so tough for us. Poor her. She don't need nobody. She don't need no one. So I don't need nobody. I don't need no one. And you think about that. So again, I was raised, again, you know, you got to be independent, self-sufficient, right? Strong, independent, and self-sufficient. So I always laugh and joke, because my husband and I, when we were dating, he came over to the apartment and was doing something. He's like, hey, I'm gonna take out your trash. And I'm like, no, I got it. I take out my trash. And he's looking like, I'm gonna just take out the trash. I'm here to take out the trash. I don't need you to take out my trash. But that was that whole, I can't depend on nobody. That's what, you know, was ingrained, whether it was being told to me by the women in my family, or if it was indirectly reinforced by the lack of absence of men in my family, right? So that's what I learned. This is what you just have to do. All right, so no presentation is complete without a little rap music. So let's get Lil Boosie. I think Lil Boosie got locked back up. I don't know. I feel like I just heard something on the radio, but we still free and Boosie. But anyway, many of you may have even learned how to spell independent from this song. But he says she got her own house, she got her own car, 2 jobs, work hard, you a bad broad. Then Boosie told y'all, if you ain't on, sit down. If you ain't on, sit down. So we're gonna let Boosie tell us what it means to be independent. But this is what it's looking like in our music. And I'm sure there are many other songs that you may be able to identify or relate to. My friend I was just talking to, she said, you don't have Miss Independent up there by Neo. So I'm sure there are other songs. I'm Not Your Superwoman. I can never remember the lady's name, but I'm Not Your Superwoman. She tell you what's happening and what's not gonna happen. So, Do We Rebel? All of these songs, though, they celebrate the awesomeness of Black women. What you have to say, is it this badge of honor? Or is it a way to mask maybe what's going on? Do we rebel? Do Black women rebel in this? Are they going to come to therapy? And what is this going to look like? So, is this resilience or what? So, let's see what happens. So this silent suffering, you see that mask over there, bless her heart, you see that smile, because this is what has to happen when I go out into society. I can't see the comments that are popping up, and I'm afraid that if I hit on it, I'm gonna mess up something on my screen. So if you have a question, interject. I wanna be mindful of the time and get through the slides, but I don't want you to think that I'm ignoring you if I'm not responding. I don't wanna click on anything. But anyway, so the silent suffering. Why are you depressed? If our people could make it through slavery, we can make it through anything. When a Black woman suffers from a mental disorder, the opinion is that she is weak, and weakness is not tolerated, is intolerable in Black women. You should take your troubles to Jesus, not some stranger psychiatrist. We know those, just pray about it, right? And you're too strong to be feeling this way. You're too strong of a Black woman to be feeling this way. Get over yourself. So I'm going to imagine that I can see all of you, because again, I have my stuff minimized, but raise your hand if you were told any of this. Raise your hand. Perhaps maybe you are not a Black woman on here, but you work with Black women and you've heard a Black woman or one of your clients say this. I've said it. I'm the clinician and I've said it, right? So how does this type of cultural stigma impact Black women? We have to look at that. In the midst of all the adversity, we're still taught to be strong, and in turn creates a fear and a silence. But there's a lot of unresolved pain, a lot of unresolved hurt, a lot of confusion. And it's a lot of trauma. So again, it's the generational trauma, right? Again, I have 2 boys. The day that I found out I'm doing the gender ultrasound thing. The day that I found out I was having 2 boys, I kid you not, Mike Brown's body was still in the street. Mike Brown had been murdered. His body was still in the street. And you know what I did? I said, oh, SH, I'm going to have the talk. I didn't even have kids. They weren't even here yet. And I remember the lady said, okay, we got one's here, a boy. And, sometimes you may want a boy and a girl, whatever, but it was fear in me. And so this is what I talk about, or when I give examples, when I talk about trauma, or when I talk about even privilege. If you're something that's supposed to be a very joyous and happy and fun occasion, I found out the gender of my children. If that is marked with fear and panic, that's gonna be traumatic, okay? If I tell my son, sit down, you can't do that. Well, yeah, he can't be doing all of this and that, but the reality is, what I really know is society won't allow you to do that. You won't get to do that. So again, those are the intergenerational traumatic things that can be passed down. Or I talked to how Dr. DeGroote said, these became adaptive to survive, okay? So what does this look like in mental health? For all of us who kind of want to know that part, you're saying, okay, enough of that. How am I going to help my clients if they come? So we know that Black women have similar to even higher rates of depression compared to men and to other ethnicities. They are at risk. This ideology of the strong Black woman places African American women at risk for physical and emotional health problems. Again, there is a belief that you cannot be vulnerable, or that you are not vulnerable to depression, or that depression develops from having a weak mind, poor health, troubled spirit, and self-love. And because of this, it's going to delay help seeking because it's looking like something else. They may say, oh, I'm just tired, or no, I'm not depressed. I can't be depressed, because even when we look at the commercials on TV, you remember that commercial, and they're like, it was some medication. They're like, where does depression hurt? And the lady's like, everywhere. And who does depression hurt? And it's like, everyone. And she's just sitting on a couch. Or the one where the it was like a little doll or whatever, and they had to crank her up, and she kind of cranks up or whatever. That's the idea that people have of depression. So if I'm overachieving, if I'm running everything, if I'm doing X, Y, and Z, that doesn't look like depression. Okay, so that again is going to delay help seeking. This is why we have to stop and break down a lot of the myths, a lot of the stigma. There's also this held belief of, don't you put your business out in that street, don't you air out dirty laundry. I'm sure many of you can say it with me. What goes on in this house? What? Somebody chime in. What happens? What goes on in this house? What?
Stays in the house.
There it is, right? And I can't even see you. So these are the things that are passed down. That's what we were said. You cannot trust these outside people. You can't trust maybe those that are here, because you just don't know what they're going to do, nor can you go out and trust someone who's supposed to be for you. And again, if we think about it, we're thinking about therapy, we're thinking about access to therapy, we're thinking all the way back. Therapy was not available. It was not meant for African Americans or Black people. You know, we were already less than a full person, no capacity for pain, no emotional capacity. So therapy was never there. We even look at the theories that are used. More recently, think about your culture class. How much did you learn about multicultural counseling and working with ethnic minorities? And so how are you going to know this, right? So there's this stigma, and that stigma is even stronger in the Black community when we are looking at mental illness, okay? It can have a detrimental impact. So I put on here the strong Black woman and religion because African Americans do tend to place a higher importance or value on religion or spirituality. They may use this in place of formal counseling. And I say formal like that because, again, what works for a person works. So when I talk about formal, I'm talking about psychotherapy and counseling or something like that, mental health counseling. But African American women attend religious services more than their counterparts. They're going to use spirituality and religion as a source for coping. If you look at the makeup of the church or the Black church, it's going to be about 80% of the congregation, or a majority of the congregation will be women. Okay. And even those without, this was from a Pew research study, even those without a specific religious affiliation report that both religion and spirituality are vital to them. So we talk about religion and this religious coping. There's going to be a reliance on spirituality and religiosity. A lot of times prayer, we're going to hear that, just pray about it. The church attendance, religious practices. I'll typically ask my clients is like, how do you practice your faith? Fellowship in church. And then it becomes though therapeutic to tell God about it, because a lot of times the church is going to be seen as this safe haven, is going to be seen as a solution for mental health problems, is going to be seen as an alternative to seeking formal mental health services. It allows this outward expression of this anguish that Black women may be experiencing. It almost becomes like this therapeutic asylum. And so all of these church women become therapists for each other. Okay. So we have to kind of even look at that. And then two, because that of their position within the community, a lot of times Black clergy are going to be less stigmatized than going out and seeing mental health clinicians. There's more credibility, okay? Plus, a lot of issues are going to be framed in a very spiritual reference, and it's a little easier to accept. We even got to think about it. Well, hey, you just got to, you got to suffering, long suffering, right? All right, let's move on. So this client has made it to your office because maybe she's found you, or she's on some type of website and did a Google search of therapists or clinicians near me, or Black clinicians, or just whatever she was looking for, okay? What is this going to look like? So you remember the slide I showed earlier where I talked about some of the symptoms of historical trauma. I've talked about a lot of the societal and race-based and gender-based issues, right? So here we are, mood and anxiety disorders, stress. So this may look like, again, anger. It may look like depression. It may look like trauma. I operate from a very trauma-focused lens, and so I look at a lot of things as traumatic reactions or traumatic responses to traumatic experiences. If I am going to work every single day and there are microaggressions, or there is do this, do this, do that, again, there's this compound effect, okay? So there's the stress. If I am worried about my son, my husband, my aunt, my cousins, things like that, these are those stressors that keep compounding, that keep being added on. Also, identity issues and role conflict. Maybe now I'm a mom and I'm adjusting to being a mom, being a wife, being a caretaker. Who am I in this? What am I supposed to do? Like, I feel lost. I feel inept, so to speak. I don't have an identity, or I don't even know what my role and my identity is. It also may look like medical or somatic conditions. So before going to, we know there's a historical mistrust or cultural mistrust of mental health and medical professionals when it comes to African Americans, and rightfully and understandably so. But a lot of times these women may present to their medical doctor or their PCP before they come to therapy, because what it's going to look like is high blood pressure, sugar or diabetes, right? It may look like tons of headaches, weight gain, unexplained weight loss, like all of these things that are happening. And so maybe they're getting something medically, and maybe their doctor is or is not suggesting, like, hey, maybe you need to go talk to somebody, okay? Interpersonal issues, relationship problems. So it may be with their children, it may be with their spouse, it may be with coworkers, it may be with friends. I have a person I used to work with, and she was like, no, I trust all these people and this and that. I said, oh, okay, so you can go out with your girlfriends? And she was like, no. And I'm thinking, well, why not? What we came up with and identified is because I'm afraid that I'll be exposed. Something will come out, I'll be exposed as I'm not the strong one. And hey, I can't be out here being vulnerable because somebody may use this against me. Or I say I trust them, but can I really trust them? So all of this starts taking place. And so these relationship problems or interpersonal issues start to happen. Traumatic experiences and responses can be there. A lot of grief. And it can be that I'm grieving maybe a particular loss, a physical loss, but I'm also grieving the inability to grieve. I am grieving the inability to just be. And I'm mad about it. And then anger. And so I put the asterisk by anger because, like I said, we know that anger is a secondary emotion, right? Now, not to say that people aren't angry and anger is there and it's a real emotion, but a lot of times there's something underlying that. What I am is I'm tired of you disrespecting me. Or what I am is these subtle acts of racism, these covert acts of microaggressions or whatever it may be. But this is when she is termed the angry Black woman. This is when you get that EAP referral to your office. And, they say, well, she did X, Y, and Z, or she had an outburst, because this literally happened. She had an outburst and there's this managerial referral. No one said what caused the outburst, which was a lot of inappropriate sexual context and things happening going on, and how she was constantly being berated in meetings full of men, right? So yeah, she's gonna have an outburst, all right. Absolutely, I'm having one with her. But now she's now labeled as the angry Black woman, and folks at work don't feel safe, and all this other stuff. So this is what's happening. So what are some clinical strategies? Okay, what can we do? One, understanding that a lot of times, so we think about trauma, right? What we know about trauma, what we know about, our parasympathetic nervous system, we know about that fight or flight mode, right? A lot of times there's this constant fight or flight mode. This client may not even be aware of it. Okay, so we got to think about that. But one, we already talked about the importance sometimes of religion and spirituality in this population. So one, first identifying with your client, is this important to her? How does she practice her religion and her spirituality? How does it support her? And then incorporating that, if she wants it, into the therapeutic process. It's not about us, right? It's about our client and what they need. I always challenge when I'm training, I'll always challenge people, we're doing our intake assessment. I'll say, how many of you ask about religion and spirituality? And a lot of times people don't raise their hand, or they may just kind of brush over it, right? What happens with that is your client is now indirectly informed that it's not okay for them to talk about this, or it may not be okay, or it may not be supported. Okay, so not necessarily putting our views out there. We know we're not supposed to do that, but how can we incorporate something that may be extremely important, extremely supportive, and extremely valuable to that client into the therapeutic setting? Okay, narrative therapy. How can I help perhaps my client write this or rewrite this, right? What does this need to look like? So, do you want to still be identified as the strong Black woman? If the answer is no, okay, well, let's rewrite this. What can we do? Maybe your answer is yes, but maybe I want it to look differently though. Maybe I want it to look like self-care. I want it to look like it's okay to ask for help. I want it to look like setting boundaries. So using some types of narrative therapy in the clinical setting. I already talked about me being a trauma-focused or trauma-informed, a trauma-focused clinician, but what are some of the trauma-focused therapies that can take place? If I am having constant and recurrent traumas, I may not even understand that a lot of my responses, again, are trauma-based responses. Okay, so maybe your client may need EMDR, mindfulness-based. One of my clients, she said, does that work? And I said, well, girl, let's try. Everybody's different. But I'll have my client and I ask them, I'll say, how is this working? How is this doing? My one will say, and she literally said, girl, that's exactly what she said. I don't do that. I don't do that. So that just meant, hey, I got to switch it up and figure out what is going to work for her. It's not that she's not making progress or she's resistant. I do not like that term. She's resistant to treatment. It's whatever treatment I was using was not working for her. Okay, so it's okay to ask our clients that. What do we need to do? So on one hand, she's not going to do the mindfulness. On the other hand, my other client may be saying, well, let's do it. I need that because my brain is everywhere. Okay, empty chair. Maybe I need to put this chair out here and do this technique to have her address this other part of the strong Black woman, or addressing maybe some of these other narratives or some of these other adaptive behaviors that she has acquired, and how she can move through that. Okay. And then some cognitive processing therapy may be needed, where we're going to first maybe start with the psychoeducation of trauma or of PTSD, those thoughts, those emotions, and then having our client have this formal processing of this trauma. And then being able to go from there and identify and look up and address maybe anything that was unhelpful, any unhelpful thinking, any of those beliefs that may not have been working for them, and how they can kind of modify them, which even goes into our CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm a very cognitive clinician, and just helping our clients to see, like, hey, what are your thoughts when it comes to this, and how could that may be connected to your feelings and your actions, or how, you know, were you feeling about this, and then how did that connect to some of your behaviors and what you decided to think about it. Okay, I gotta be strong. Again, like I said, who told you that? What does strong look like? Can we change this up? Can we reframe this? Culturally adapted treatment. So again, if you're using old, outdated, theories that are not going to work and address the systemic issues that ethnic minorities or Black women or Black men or indigenous populations experience, then we may have to take a look at it and say, okay, well, maybe I really do want to use reality therapy, right? So reality therapy is going to say, well, what are you doing? You know, what, or what do you want? What are you doing to get what you want? How is that working for you? And then what's the plan? Remember the WDEP, right? WDEP. Well, how is that working? But I could say, I want a job. I'm out here trying to, you know, move up in the ladder at work, and it's not working. Why? Because there are systemic issues that are in place. So it's not going to. The reality is everything that I'm doing, if there's a system that's in place that's not working, this may be extremely stressful or a struggle for me. So making sure whatever theories we're using are culturally adapted, or that our treatment is culturally adapted. And remembering culture is, I always say, in the eye of the beholder. Culture goes beyond race, gender, sexual orientation, right? It's music, it's food, it's beliefs, it's songs, it's dances, right? So how can I adapt whatever treatment technique, whatever theory I'm using to fit this client right here? Okay. And then some wellness practices. How does this look like, right? This may have to look like more than just the manicure and a pedicure. They'll say, I want to get my hair done, my nails done, and that's great. But what else are you doing, right? I was telling someone the other day, I took me a little nap yesterday. Next thing I know, it's 4 hours later. I'm like, oh my gosh. But I remember in my head thinking, girl, you got to get up. And then on the other side, I'm like, no, listen to your body. Right? Listen to your body. So I'm trying to like practice wellness without feeling guilty. There are so many other things to do. I got to get this webinar done. I had to speak to my high school yesterday. I got to record my lectures. I got to do grading. But at the end of the day, if I'm passed out somewhere, ain't none of it's going to get done, right? So helping our clients look and see what wellness can look like for them. It may be the manis and petties. It may be yoga. It may be gym. It may be sleeping in. It may be asking for help. It may be setting a timer in the phone to say it is time to eat lunch. How many of us go through, I just did it today. How many of us go through like, oh my God, it's 3 o'clock and I haven't even eaten. Okay. So helping our clients identify what that needs to look like. And then lastly here are my final thoughts. So what do? We now know what the strong Black woman syndrome narrative is and what that looks like. We know now a little more information about generational trauma or historical traumas, and how those both combine and impact, help seeking how those combine and impact maybe even the treatment, and if our clients plus. So we want to understand the importance of addressing culture and how it may impact the needs of African American women. Okay, we as clinicians and as family and friends and loved ones, we want to reduce the stigma by dispelling myths about mental health. We want to help provide accurate knowledge to ensure that our clients are more informed, that we are more informed. The other helping professionals that we work with are more informed, encouraged our loved ones, our friends, our colleagues to seek professional help. We know there are several platforms out there now where people can find clinicians, remove barriers to treatment. So again, what kind of advocacy, what are you doing to help improve access to mental health care? Okay. And then again, engaging in advocacy and social justice issues that are going to affect racial and ethnic minorities. And I didn't put it on here, and gender minorities, right? So Black women may face a triple whammy: race, mental health issues, and then being a woman. So what are we doing to help dismiss or dispel or decrease a lot of those disparities in marginalized populations? Woo, I can take a breath now. Thank you. So now I will click on my screen and hope nothing goes away, which it did.
That was awesome. So we did have a few comments throughout, people just really agreeing with things that you were saying that like stood out to them, that they felt really just rang true, especially when you asked people to raise their hand. A ton of hands went up, just people really feeling what you're explaining about your own experience, but also what they've experienced themselves. One thing that was said was that this was amazing. I love how she packaged this presentation. Any, if not all of this info could take days to discuss and break down.
Yeah.
A lot of people really agreed with that sentiment, but really like knowing, so Terry said, it's exciting to think about all of these contextual factors regarding our clients and our work. Shakita said that I'm so inspired by this presentation. You were speaking my clinical language, Dr. Holloway. And then we had Kiana, who said, as a student about to go into practicum, I am so happy I could be a part of this. So we just have a ton of people who are either students or clinicians who just said that this was awesome. You did an amazing job, and really just feeling the excitement and like feeling not just validated, but then also like they're not going through this alone, or they're definitely not doing this work alone. So
Right.
I really just want to thank you so much for that. We are completely out of time, but I'm not sure if you have a few seconds for maybe one question, if someone...
Sure, I'm sorry, y'all, yes.
So if anyone has a question, feel free to type it in the chat box.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if we can't get to their questions, please email me, y'all.
Okay,
Like,
perfect.
I love talking about this too, so.
Yeah, so for people who are on the phone, Dr. Holloway's email address is Kristy C. at gmail.com. She also has her website with that same name as well. Someone is asking, so two questions. First question is, how do we gain permission to use slides?
Yeah, just email me and I'm gonna say, all right.
Okay, so
Shout a sister out now when you around here.
yes, give credit where credit is due for sure, keeping it in the AMCD family. And then another question was, can you go on live on Facebook and for Q&A? So Facebook Live Q&A.
When?
Well, in somewhere between your strong Black woman calendar.
I know, right?
But she does have a Facebook, it looks like a Facebook page
Yeah.
for New Vision Counseling, as well as LinkedIn, and you can also follow her on Instagram. So I would say jump on social media, and then in the future, hopefully you are going live on your social media platforms already.
Yeah.
A few other things we had. So Kiana said, I definitely doing my research paper on the same topic. Is it possible for me to get your references?
Yes, Kiana, girl, don't reinvent the wheel. That's not even all of them. Email me and I can give you probably 3 pages worth. Don't be out here starting over from scratch.
Yeah, so it looks like if you have direct questions for using resources, getting slides, getting more information, follow Dr. Holloway on her social media, email her, ask for those things. Like we already said, give credit where credit is due, please. And then Elena said, hope to share this with the Black student orgs at my university. I will contact you for permission.
Yes, definitely. That's if I send you, because I see about people asking, if I send you the slides or in a PDF, do we have emails for everybody to, like, it can go out for those who registered or who attended?
Yes,
Okay.
I do. So I do have everyone's email. And so if you send that to me, I will email out the slides and we will put another disclaimer in there. You do have one already on your slides, just asking for permission. So we do have one actual question. So we're going to end with this one.
Okay.
So MDJ said, I am wondering, given that there is this discussion that Black men are taken out of the house, so that is why they pick up the responsibility. I'm assuming is why Black women pick up the responsibility. Is it simply removal of the Black man, or the fact that women are often tasked with more responsibilities? And how does that impact not only Black women, but Black girls?
So MDJ, I'm glad that you asked that. I think it's a combination of both. I always tell, when I'm going through this and I'm talking to clients, I'm saying, we're complaining about not getting help or having help, but we're not putting ourselves in a position to do that. So no one knows that we need help, right? So that whole check on your strong friends type thing. So it becomes, again, this innate piece of us where we just have to do it. And so maybe the man doesn't know, oh no, she do need me to take out the trash. So I think it's a combination of the removal of the Black men and the breakdown of the Black family, but then also the fact that this is what women and Black women have been told and instilled for so long, that you just can't rely. You don't know if he's gonna come home. You don't know X, Y, and Z. And I definitely think it has an impact on Black girls. Like I said, I was just preparing for a thing that I was doing yesterday with some high schoolers. And one of the things I was saying is we're telling our little girls, somehow they're learning you have to be a strong Black woman. So you got to be a little girl. I want you to be, you can't be a little girl. You got to now know that you got to be a woman, and a strong woman at that, right? So I think it definitely has an impact. And I think that's why it's important for us to reach out, for us to talk about this, for us to look again at what this narrative means. Again, it may be very adaptive for a person, and that's great. I appreciate that. But we need to look at it when it is maladaptive and how we may be passing that down to not only our little Black girls, but also our little Black boys.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. So I'm sure there's like 8 million more questions because this was amazing. I can't thank you enough for jumping in last minute and answering our call from AMCD to offer more webinars geared towards clinical practice. So from our committee, thank you so much for offering this webinar and giving us your valuable time. And then for everyone else, I will email out the CEU link to you along with the PowerPoint slides when I do get that. As a final reminder, do give credit to Dr. Holloway. If you are interested in using something, reach out to her if you do have more questions. And we will see you in May for our next webinar. So you all have a great, wonderful weekend, and you guys be safe out there. So thank you, Dr. Holloway. Have a great night.
Y'all, bye.
Bye.